Welcome to Salcedo Paranormal. It is Wednesday, February 23rd, 2022, and today I will be sharing more true ghost stories from the web. As always, to find all episodes of the podcast, along with all links, whether they're to social media or ways to donate or ways to contact me, you can find all of those at salcedoparanormal.podbean.com, and that's SALSIDO paranormal.podbean.com. And always looking to hear from you all, whether it's comments or questions or topic suggestions for shows, or if you have experiences they'd like to share, whether it's in a text format or if you want to come on to the show. Either way. And then you can talk about them with me on the show. That's always fun. And either way is fine. You can always find those links there as well. And of course, those can be experiences of your own or others that you trust. Just always looking for stories of paranormal experiences. And that's the important thing, is sharing those stories. Not so much names or locations. If you don't want to, that's not a problem. Just the stories are important. So always happy to hear from you all. And thank you all for listening, whether you're here for the live stream or you listen to the podcast or the YouTube. I appreciate all of it. So, I believe with that, I can get to the stories. We'll see how many of these we get through today. So, let's see here. Okay. So this first one says, this all would have taken place roughly 10 or 11 years ago, over a period of 2 years. We had moved into this older house after living in another house in the city for 2 years. It was a creepy house, but very normal and in a fairly populated area that was gaining more popularity. The house was quite old, built well on the outside and made from concrete, but was showing its age on the inside. I never felt anything weird about the house, just annoyed at how often a pipe would leak or paint would need to be touched up. However, I very vividly remember 2 moments in that house. First, I was sleeping in my sister's room with my sister and mother. I must have been around 10 years old, with my sister being 5. I didn't like sleeping alone, and neither did my sister, so we often shared rooms with our parents. I remember randomly waking up in the middle of the night, no idea why, and after a few minutes of lying there awake, I heard a surprisingly loud female scream. It scared me. I woke my mother and said, "Did you hear the scream?" To which she responded, "It was probably just the cats." There were many stray cats that lived in the area, but I knew it wasn't cats. It sounded as if a woman screaming briefly, and definitely sounded as if it came from inside the house. And it wasn't our cat because he was asleep with my dad. I eventually fell asleep again and didn't bring it up again. Never found out what it was. Second, one night I was lying in bed with my dad, my mom in another room, with my sister. I was trying to fall asleep. My dad was reading a book. We then both heard what sounded like a large plastic container being dropped. My dad and I got up to investigate. My sister and mother were asleep, and there was nothing noticeable that had fallen. My dad explained that it was probably our cat that had knocked something over. We went to bed the next day. I'm sorry, we went to bed, and the next day I basically ignored the experience again and didn't talk about it. But we never found any signs of something falling over. After 2 years in the house and no other events happening to me, we moved to another house in the same area. It was newer and bigger. Nothing happened again, but a few years later, I brought up my story to my mom one day, who then revealed that I wasn't the only one to experience strange things in that house. She explained how one night when my sister and I were sleeping in our own rooms, my dad had gone to bed to read a book while my mom stayed in the living room to finish a cup of tea. My dad was lying on his side reading when he vividly remembers feeling my mother get into bed with him. He even said, "You finished that tea quickly." But when he turned around, no one was there. My mother was still drinking tea in the living room, and my sister and I were asleep in our own rooms. He struggled to fall asleep that night. Another time, my mom's friend had come over to meet my mom and see the house for the first time while my sister and I were at school, and my father was at work. My mom's friend, we'll call her Elle, was sitting in the living room while my mom made coffee for the two of them. Elle then saw my father walk up the stairs to the second floor. She greeted my dad. Let's call him Jay. "Hello, Jay. Good to see you." And just so you know, I use first initials for names in these articles a lot of times, or these stories. It says, my mom comes out of the kitchen with coffee and questions who Elle was talking to. Elle says she was greeting my father. But my mother, explained how my father was at work and no one else was in the house. Elle was adamant that she saw a man walk up the second floor. My mom and her went upstairs to check and found no one. Elle left immediately and took a few months before she came back. Finally, the scariest of them all, my mom was watching my sister while I was at a friend's house and my dad was at work. My sister was playing in her room while my mom read a book in the same room. My mom got up briefly to go to the kitchen and pack some things away. When she got back, my sister was coloring with crayons. My mom was confused as she always kept the crayons on the top shelf in a cupboard with the door closed, because my sister went through crayons like crazy. She asked my sister where she got the crayons from, to which my sister replied, "The man gave them to me." My mom was alone in the house and had left my 4-year-old sister alone for only 2 minutes. This freaked my mother out a lot, and she never told anyone about it. After moving out, many of our friends told my parents of how they disliked coming to our house. They couldn't say why, but they said it had a strange feeling to it. Let's see here. That's weird. I'm seeing part of text here that doesn't make sense. Huh. I'm gonna close out of this document. It's doing that glitching thing again. I'm gonna close out of here. I think that was the end of the story, though. But sounds like a lot of activity in that house. That's weird. That's a fresh document, so it can't just be that it was too full of data, because I literally just made that the other day. Because I had archived a bunch of the stories from before, But yeah, that's interesting. Um, that yeah, it's hello APOC. Yeah, I don't know. It was reading fine, and then it got to the after end of that sentence, and then there was a big blank space on the next page, and then a sentence fragment, and then further down there was more of those weird like colors and dots and look like parts of text. Really weird. But we'll try opening it up again and see where that goes. Hopefully it fixes it. I wonder if I wouldn't think I don't know. I wouldn't think having the document open for half an hour or more would do anything to it. But you never know. It's funny because um, things can happen when you're doing these kinds of shows. Um, okay. All right, here we go. I found it's back to normal now apparently. So this I'll just go with this. There was a little more. It says after moving out, many of our friends told my parents of how they disliked coming to the house. They couldn't say why, but said it had a strange feeling to it. And my mom never told me about the incidents as to not scare me. 10 years later, we haven't experienced anything ever again. But we all still remember and dislike talking about that house. Okay, there we go. That's the end of that one. And so yeah, that's funny that yeah, it is a fairly yeah. I got this 2021, beginning of 2021. No, 2020, I think. Either way, it's no more than a couple years old. So, but everything else works fine. APOC was saying my computer is pretty new. Yeah, it is. It's so anyway, yeah, that worked out for now. Anyway, so um, that's an interesting story, and you find that sometimes with houses after the fact, you'll hear people who visited there say, "I never liked going there," and so it's sounds like there was a lot of activity there. It does seem like maybe it was something going on with the house if the family has not had experiences since then. The house or the land, obviously, can be either or. Um, so yeah, I thought that was a lot of little experiences there to have. So, but let's see. Let's get on to the next story because we're already 15 minutes in. Um. Okay. Yeah, we may only get through like 4 stories again today, but that's all right. Like I said, some of these stories I found yesterday are pretty long. All right. So this next one says, in the last 2 weeks or so, sometimes at night, I will hear banging and stomping from the flat below ours. There's only one apartment per floor. Um, Only one apartment below me. This usually happens around 1 a.m. when normally the whole building is silent. It's interesting because no one lives in that apartment. The elderly woman who occupied it since before we moved in sadly passed away very suddenly last month. Okay. I wrote off the noises as my imagination the first few times, since I am very much a believer of the paranormal. So I am known to get uh, overly excited about these things. That wasn't until my boyfriend and I heard the noises this morning. He confirmed they were coming from directly below us. As a huge non-believer, he said it's likely a window was left open in the apartment below, and that the wind is causing it to open and shut. He didn't sound very confident, though, because you could clearly hear the sounds moving around the house, not just from the wall where the window would be. Our apartments all have glass on the front doors, so you can easily see movement inside. I went down to have a look to see if the landlord was in there for some reason, and no sign of life whatsoever. To make it weirder, you can see my building clearly from the hill just behind. And when I walked up there earlier, it looks like the windows in the apartment below us were fully closed. So, that's an interesting little one there. And it's funny that there's no one in the apartment, apparently. It did say in the article, I didn't want to go into it too much because it's not super important, but the older woman that passed away suddenly, she didn't die in the apartment, but near it. I didn't read that part of it. But, so it makes you wonder if that's her, or if something else has moved in, or someone else, spiritual in nature, or non-physical. It's hard to say. So, but sounds like they're having activity there, and it's more than one person hearing it. So, makes me wonder what would happen to that place when someone new moved in there. If the activity would stop or keep going. Of course, if it kept going, that would make it harder to tell if the neighbor below was making any noises until you I guess, try to get to know them and find out for sure either way. But, so yeah, neat story there. It's not fun to have to hear a bunch of noises from your apartment below, but interesting activity. Doesn't seem like it's negative, just sounds. So, anyway, let's see here. I'll go on to the next story. Let's see here. Okay. This one says, last week at around 5 a.m., I was awoken by my fake plant falling off my shelf. It was sitting on the shelf about 5 feet high, nothing leaning on or against it. It fell straight forward, and the pot it was in did not crack. When it fell, it was rolling around on the ground while I worked up the courage to look at what the heck it just fell. I propped it up and tried to figure out how it managed to fall, but it was literally sitting in the middle of the shelf. There's no way to explain it falling. There's no vibration that would have shaken the shelf. And I also have some books and such that didn't budge. And that's a short one. Sounds like that's their only experience. Possibly. A lot of times in these articles, they'll say if it's just one experience or if they've had several of them. If it was just one experience, then I don't know. But yeah, very interesting. And hello everyone in chat. Thank you for being here. I see you all there. I was hoping you missed it. I had my Word document glitch out on me earlier as I was reading the end of a story, so that was interesting. But seems to be working okay now. Yeah, that's the second time that's happened. Excuse me. The first time it happened, It was on a document that was close to 100,000 words. So we kind of talked about it in the chat last time it happened, and maybe thought um, that it was just because the file was getting so big. But this document just made it the other day, so it doesn't have that nearly that many words in it. So I don't think it's the amount of data in it that caused it that time. So it makes me wonder if it didn't cause it this time, then I wonder if it actually caused it last time. So, of course, I don't know, but it was yeah, I was reading it, and then it cut off, and then it went to just a random part of a sentence that didn't make any sense for the article, and then I think I recognized that random part from like another story in the document, and then there was just a bunch of space in between those two sections, and then some random blobs of color, little dots or segments of color and text, and I had to close down the file and restart it again. So I don't know what that was about, but I opened it up again, and so far it's doing okay again. So, but yeah, so that was interesting. So yeah, there's not much to go on with that one story, but it is interesting if there was stuff on that shelf that didn't fall or tip over, but that one plant did. So I don't know. But yeah, so anyway, I'll go on to the next one. The next one is long again. We'll see how long it takes, and then we'll go from there. So, this one says, I'm from the UK, and I went to university in a city that was extremely important in the English Civil War. It says 1642 to 1651. I'm just gonna say here that I'm not a historian. I don't know. I can't vouch for anything that's in this article being accurate. So this is all just from the writer of the article. I like to say that in articles that kind of mention historical events and places. So the city was extremely important in the English Civil War between the Roundheads, or the parliamentarians, and the Cavaliers, or the Royalists. I lived out of the main city itself, but close enough to the city center that the cathedral was visible from my garden. I lived on a hill. There's been some debate about the whereabouts of the Roundheads station in the city at the time, but it's believed to be generally in the vicinity of where my then home currently stands. The main university accommodation was always too expensive for most people, and there wasn't enough to go around. So most people, like myself, rented private homes with other students. My home was a house in a cozy, modern 1970s-ish residential area at the end of a very quiet, very safe little cul-de-sac. My housemate would regularly leave for long weekends to go and travel to see her partner and family, so I'd often be in the house alone. This was on one of those nights. Our boiler, for some silly reason, was outside of the house on the front lawn in a little side building. So in the middle of winter, you'd have to go outside to switch the heating on and off. That doesn't sound fun. On this occasion, I'd had it on for a little while one night when I was working late on my dissertation, and I went outside to turn it off at about midnight when it started to get too hot. As I stepped outside, and opened the cupboard door. I guess they mean the building door. I remember feeling that weird tingly feeling you get when you know someone is looking at you. I'm never wrong about that feeling. So as I pull away from the boiler, close the cupboard door, and look across the street, I'm expecting to just see a neighbor watching from their window, or a cat or something. Instead, I saw a tall, silver silhouette behind my neighbor's house, or hedge, I'm sorry. And I mean, this was undoubtedly the shape of a person. My eyesight is absolutely fine, and I wasn't under the influence or stressed or tired. I know I said it was midnight. Trust me, that's nowhere near bedtime for me. And I know that's midnight. I usually don't get to bed before midnight, or even 3 or 4 in the morning. Anyway, I remember just feeling this immediate instinct of being hated to the core of my soul. It's hard to describe because I've not known something like it since. It just felt like something was trying to infest me with hostility. I genuinely can't find another way to word it, and it annoys me because I'm aware of how cheesy that sounds. But more on what it looked like. There was a full moon that night, and that cul-de-sac had no streetlights. But something was reflecting on this thing, so much so that I could see what appeared to be a head and torso made of silver, glinting metal. At first, I just thought it was someone wearing a Viking helmet or something, maybe peering over the hedge. But then I realized that hedge was over 8 feet tall, and there was nothing they could be standing on, and no space for them to stand on something that would have made them that tall. As soon as I realized that, and the horrible feeling it was making me experience, I ran inside. For some inexplicable reason, I instinctively had the urge to close every single curtain in the house. Bathroom, cupboard, you name it. If it had a window, I had to close the curtains. If it didn't have curtains, I'd just put something in front of it. Bizarrely, I had no urge to lock anything. The doors were locked already, but the windows weren't. I couldn't bring myself to look out of them in case I saw the thing again. Luckily, I knew my paranormal believing mom would be awake, as she's a real night owl, so I called her up and just burst into tears down the phone because that thing had made me feel so horrible. I've seen ghosts before and had a whole array of other bizarre paranormal experiences, but nothing that had made me feel the way I felt that night. As I was describing what happened to her, she asked me to sketch out what I saw and send it to her so she could see. I sent it over, and she asked me if I thought it could be a roundhead, and that's a member of one of the two sides of this English Civil War. The thought hadn't occurred to me at all in the moment because I was so caught up with how it had made me feel. But my mom actually worked for years in another historic location that was related to the English Civil War and knows a ton about it. She even has her own really wild ghost stories, but that's for another time. And she asked if it could have been one of the Roundheads. I looked up the armor, and sure enough, that is exactly what I saw. The shape and everything. The difference is, my soldier didn't have a face. I could just see straight through the helmet, where his head would be. Let's see here. I think that's it. Yep, that's it for that one. So, that's it for that one. That's an interesting one. Seems like maybe they might have seen or felt someone from another time. Maybe it was a spirit of someone from that time, and depending on, I don't know, the feelings are interesting, but then if you think of people that are involved in a war like that, maybe they're seeing this person, and this whoever this was, whether it was a spirit or a person in that other time, which is odd because you would think you'd still see the person, but maybe whatever or whoever it was thinking in terms of the past, and so they were thinking that's the enemy. Just a good thing that whatever this was didn't do anything other than scare the person, the writer, badly. I mean, it's not fun, but so yeah, really, really, really interesting story there, especially with the historical context of it all. And that's always neat when that happens, when you you find something that happens in an area that can connect to history, to earlier events. So I don't know. I know that was a longer one, but I feel like that was worth it for just the historical references there. Because I mean, we hear about wars that are battlefields all over where people have experiences still. So, but yeah. As Open says, the fact that the writer felt such intense feelings emanating from the figure is super strange. I would have been weirded out too. Yeah. Does not sound pleasant. I would have gotten out of there too if I'm getting that kind of a negative feeling from it. Definitely, I would not have stayed there. Stayed outside there or anything. I would have gone back inside too. So, but amazing story there of possible contact with a spirit from another time. So I think with that, I'm going to end today's episode. There's 2 more stories, but they're both longer ones, and I don't think I can do those tonight. But thank you all for being here, as always. Whether you're here for the live stream or listening to the podcast or the YouTube video. Tomorrow I will be reviewing another one of the short stories from H.P. Lovecraft, The Complete Fiction. So we'll be doing that. And then, of course, as I've said before, Friday I'll be having a guest on, Jen Hawkins, to talk about the movie Beetlejuice, and I'm really looking forward to that one. So, have a good night, and thank you all again for everything, all the support. And I will talk to you all again tomorrow night on the next episode of Salcedo Paranormal. Take care.